You're listening to the Adventurous Reinvention podcast. I'm Allison Boyle, aka She Dreams of Alpine, and this is the show that's dedicated to all the adventurous spirits out there who have either been transformed by the outdoors or are interested in what it looks like to step into a new, adventurous, and courageous kind of identity in their life. It doesn't matter what your background is in the outdoors, what age you're starting at, or where you grew up. If you're curious about the outdoors and using adventure as a way to reinvent yourself, you're in the right place. I'll be sharing all kinds of personal adventure stories, lessons I've learned from the mountains, teaching what I know about the outdoors and leadership, and interviewing some amazing adventurous women all along the way. I've been coaching women on becoming safe, confident, and self-sufficient backpackers and leaders of their own adventurous lives since 2018, and I know exactly what big fears and self-doubts can pop up along the way. I have so much to share with you, so let's dive in. Hello, my friends, and welcome back to the Adventurous Reinvention podcast. Now, this episode that I am publishing today, it is actually an MVP episode, so you might have heard of it, but it was recorded about a year ago, but it felt really relevant to this time of the year, and I wanted to bring it back because it's still one of my favorite stories to share and give you kind of a behind the scenes of my first solo backpacking trip ever. So this was many, many years ago, but I like to take you behind the scenes of, what went on with me, what I was thinking about when I first went through all this stuff too. And it's incredibly relevant because we're gearing up for our annual Solo Hikers Summit, which is just around the corner. It's only a few weeks away. We're opening up registration around May 20th, roughly. So keep an eye out. You'll want to be on our email list. So if you're not on our email list, make sure to join. You can go to shedreamsofalpine.com/email and you can get on my newsletter so you get that announcement. But that's when a registration will officially open. But I want you to save the dates. It's June 3rd, 4th, and 5th this year of 2026. So that is when our Solo Hiker Summit is coming up. And I just want to inspire you with all the great solo content. And this is a really great story, and I think you will enjoy it. So let's dive in. All right. Hello, my friends, and welcome back to the Adventurous Reinvention podcast. You are listening to episode 30, and today's episode is a special one. I thought it would be the perfect time to kind of take you all back, right? Back to the trip that shaped so much of who I am today, which was my very first solo backpacking trip. I've told this story before in different contexts, like at different events and stuff, but you might not have heard this one before. I talk a lot about my first backpacking trip, but this is my very first solo backpacking trip. So let's rewind to where it all began. So my very first solo backpacking trip was actually on a trail called the Cottonwood Lakes Trail. It's in the eastern Sierra Nevada mountains in California. And my plan was to do a 2-day, 1-night trip on the trail with a summit attempt of Mount Langley. Now, Mount Langley is the 9th tallest mountain in California, and it's considered one of the easier California 14ers. It doesn't mean it's easy, but it's considered easier because it's a class 1 hike. It is a 14,000, if you've never heard the word 14er before, that just means it's a 14,000 foot peak. It's 14,026 feet tall. So I had been working on some of the summits in California, and I was like, that would be kind of a cool little challenge to add into my solo backpacking trip. So that total hike was around 26 miles, and it had about 5,900 feet of elevation gain if you were to make it all the way to the summit. So for many people, it would be kind of an ambitious solo backpacking adventure for only 2 days. But for me at this point in my life, I had already been like head over heels for the outdoors, was doing it every weekend, getting outside, going backpacking a lot. I had a lot of mileage under my belt, so I knew that I could handle those stats, like doing 26 miles in 2 days, doing around 6,000 feet of elevation gain. Like I wasn't concerned about that physically. So I knew that was something that I could handle. So that's always something to consider when you're picking your first solo backpacking trip or any backpacking trip is like just knowing yourself and your body and make it easier. If you have like a lot of drama around the solo backpacking part, make the stats easier. Like super simple, a few miles in, like minimal elevation gain, all the things, just work with yourself. For me, this was an exciting challenge. I think at this point in my life, had already been backpacking for maybe a year or two. Because when I kind of found the outdoors, if you go back and listen to, I believe it was like episode 1 or 2 of this podcast, I talk about kind of my reinvention story of like getting into the outdoors, because I didn't grow up outdoorsy. But when I did get into the outdoors, like I got in it hard. It was like something like I really spent every weekend doing and learning a lot about more. So at this point for the solo backpacking trip, it was maybe 2014 or 2015. Like I had been backpacking quite a bit, but only in groups, ironically. I'm not really sure why at this point I hadn't gone solo yet. I just think like that wasn't on my radar because again, I didn't grow up doing this kind of thing. So I was just still learning a lot, obviously. But I do remember wanting to finally go on one. And even before, like even early on, before She Dreams of Alpine existed, I had this strong desire to know that I was self-sufficient when I hit the trail, like that I would have my own back. And I wanted to be confident in myself and independent. And I had been getting to that point with groups and I was like leading my friends on trips at that point. And I remember just wanting to test those skills on a solo overnight adventure. I also remember like at this time, I had just started dating Michael, who's my now husband, and we had been doing a lot of things together. You know, when you first start dating somebody, you do everything together. We were doing so many things together at the time. And I was starting to notice that I was like leaning on him more for certain things. And I think it's so easy to get cozy, especially in relationships, and to like lean on others in areas where they're strong. And I found myself doing that a lot with Michael. Maybe not so much with backpacking per se, because that wasn't like his main thing. But I was noticing that I was doing that a lot with like climbing, because he was in general like the stronger rock climber than I was. And we were doing a lot of climbing at the time. So part of planning this solo backpacking trip was just to remind myself of like how strong, how smart, how capable I was of doing challenging things on my own. Like I just needed to come back to myself basically and know that I had my back no matter what, and remind myself that like I could do all of these things, you know, be self-sufficient. It doesn't mean that I didn't want to do things with him. I just wanted to remind myself, do something just for me, experience my power as a woman on her own in the backcountry. That was really important to me. And like, that went into kind of the why of this solo backpacking trip. So, you know, then as we think about like what the experience was like, I want to back up a little bit. So one thing like I always tell my clients in our Backpacking Badass program is that there are always many phases to going on a backpacking trip or planning a backpacking trip, especially when you're planning to go solo. So this happens for any kind of backpacking trip, but especially if you're solo. So let me walk you through really quickly those phases before I jump into my full story. So the first phase is the excitement phase. I think it feels like for most people, it feels like incredibly empowering to like draw a line in the sand and be like, I'm going solo backpacking or I'm going backpacking. And it's kind of like your hell yeah moment where you feel all that excitement, empowerment, and like you're feeling like a badass because you've put it out on the calendar. You've said it out loud to the world. It's like a very exciting phase, right? It's a high. So that's phase one that generally everyone experiences. But then there are phases that are not so pleasant, right? So the next phase is what I call the negative feedback phase. So this especially happens when you're going solo. And it happens when you're telling your loved ones or your friends, especially if they're not into things like the outdoors or hiking or backpacking, and you tell them about your solo trip idea, and then they rain all over your parade. They tell you it's not safe, it's dangerous, you shouldn't do it. And you might start to doubt yourself, or you might get angry about it. Like it just can be a really negative experience when you were so excited about something and then everyone is kind of like telling you it's a horrible idea. So I just like to prepare people for this phase You obviously I always want my clients to be prepared and self-sufficient. And I think there are things that you can do to help your family feel more confident in your skills, but they won't always understand why you want to do something like this. So you just need to be prepared that you might not get the support that you're looking for. And be okay with that, to upset people a little bit, because this is about you and your life and doing something that you wanted to do, and it's not about them. Okay, so then the third phase is more mind drama. I don't really have a name for this phase, but it's basically like the messy middle, basically. So if you make it past the negative feedback phase, which a lot of people actually don't, surprisingly, they get the negative feedback from family members and then they just decide not to do it. But if you make it past the negative feedback phase, you're likely going to have more mind drama about the whole thing. So I'm afraid to tell you there's more negative emotion coming. There's usually a lot of time between when you set your goal to go solo or to go on any kind of backpacking trip and your actual backpacking trip. So that means there's a lot of time to think about it and talk yourself out of it, especially if, planning is new to you, that feels overwhelming. And all of the things that can just come up along the way. So it's important to expect that to come up and not to judge it and just keep moving forward. Take small steps, keep planning your trip, taking that forward action. This is where having access to a community of people who get it is really important. So a lot of my clients, when they have the mind drama, which if you listen to episode 29, that was a hot topics episode about things our clients are talking about in our Backpacking Badass program, you get a glimpse of how we support each other through these moments of mind drama. But it's really important to have somebody you can kind of come to and be like, I'm sort of freaking out a little bit and I need help. And that's where a community really comes in to help you keep moving forward towards your goals. The final phase is what I call pre-trip resistance phase. It is the week or two before your trip, your actual trip. If you've made it that far, you're a week out from your trip, expect that this phase will most likely happen to you. And I did a podcast episode all about this phase. It's episode 10. It's about pre-trip resistance. But basically, in a nutshell, there will be a million excuses that come up all of a sudden the week before your trip on why you shouldn't go on your solo backpacking trip or any backpacking trip. You could be behind on work, your kids don't want you to go, you feel really tired, your partner's worried about you, you're scared. Even though you might be more than ready to go on this adventure, you start maybe even telling yourself you're not excited about it anymore. All of those thoughts are just pre-trip resistance mind drama. And it's all very, very normal. And definitely go listen to my podcast episode all about it for a deeper dive on this kind of pre-trip resistance phase, because it's one of the biggest things that keeps people from getting out on the trail. But the most important thing to know is that it's coming. It will happen, and keep going, right? So I actually think the hardest part of a solo backpacking trip is actually making it to the trailhead, because of all of that negative emotion that can come up before your trip. So a lot of people are so worried about what's going to happen on the trail. And I find that most of my clients tap into their power when they're on the trail. It's the pre-trip stuff that really holds them back from getting out there. So let me tell you, for my first solo backpacking trip, leading up to that trip, I went through every single phase that I mentioned up there. I had the empowerment high when I decided to go. It was kind of hell yeah, it's my first solo backpacking trip. I'm such a badass. I was very excited about it. And then I had, of course, some of the resistance when I told people, and I got that classic, isn't that dangerous kind of look from people, mostly from family members and coworkers. But I was getting more used to that at this point, so that didn't hold me back too much. But then there was the planning the trip that felt overwhelming, because there were a lot of unknowns for me. It was a new area for me. I hadn't backpacked in that specific part of the Eastern Sierra. I hadn't done a 14er before. No, I had done probably a 14er before, but I hadn't done one on my own, and I hadn't done that one. And then reading about it online, because a 14,000 foot peak, there can be technical challenges. So I did a lot of pre-trip research about Mount Langley. And I remember reading, there was a section on the 14er that sounded like spicy is the best way for me to describe it. Maybe not quite class 1, which class 1 is just like normal hiking. And I was like in my head about it. I was like, what does that mean? Like, what is this like bouldery section mean? Is it hard? Will it be dangerous? I was like overthinking it. I was also concerned about snow because I was kind of planning this trip at the end of the season. So it was early October when I got my permit, and I knew that that was a risk of having too much snow, and I didn't want to bring any technical gear with me. I had just started mountaineering and learning some of those skills, but I didn't want to do that on my own. So like I knew that was like a line I was drawing for myself to not do anything that required like more skills. But you know, that could mean I couldn't go on my trip. So there was a lot of overwhelm in planning the trip. And then finally, there was, of course, like those last minute panic in the week leading up to the trip that happened for me as well. Because like I was a full-time engineer at the time. I was stressed, like my weeks were so busy. I remember also during that, when I had planned that trip, my friends were going on a climbing trip. So I started talking myself out of going on the solo backpacking trip because I was like, well, I should just go climbing with my friends. That sounds fun. And it was a classic pattern. But thankfully, I did have some experience with this mind drama. So I trudged on forward towards my goal, and I did make it to the trailhead. So once I started the hike, like everything clicked for me, and I got into problem solving mode and like got really stoked again on the trip, which is what often happens for me. Like I still have pre-trip resistance. A lot of times it sounds a bit different than it used to back then, but it's a lot of times like, oh, I'm so busy. I could just stay home, do something like nearby versus going out on this bigger trip that's going to take longer. That's usually my pre-trip resistance now. But I always kind of click into place once I'm out there and make it to the trailhead. So trust the process, get to the trailhead, and then move into the next phase. So I followed the trail up to the Cottonwood Lakes Basin. It's one of the most stunning areas in the Eastern Sierra. And the hike into Cottonwood Lakes area is actually quite lovely, and it's not very steep. The steep part kind of comes up going over the pass and up to Mount Langley. So I actually recommend this trail to a lot of my California students as a great solo backpacking trip. If you leave off the Mount Langley summit part of this trip from what I'm talking about, like the miles and elevation gain are actually quite enjoyable and doable for most people. And you get to be in a really stunning area of the Eastern Sierra. So that's just kind of a little side note to those of you who are in California or going to the Eastern Sierra. It's a great area. So let's get into some of the details about when I was actually out there and what challenges came up for me, because I had a lot. I learned a lot on this trip. So originally, I had planned to summit Mount Langley via what they call the Old Army Pass. It was, when I read about it online, it was supposed to be shorter. And so the conclusion I came to with like my pre-trip research was people seemed fine about it. There was not a lot of concern that it was just like a little bit more rugged, but shorter. And so I was like, okay, that's what I'm going to do. I was a little bit worried that there might be too much snow on it just from reading reports, but I didn't have a super up-to-date like snow report before I went out there. But when I got there, it was clear that there was too much snow. So at least with being alone and like not having any technical gear for that kind of thing, I knew that I didn't want to go up Old Army Pass. So at first, when I made it, like I was all, in my feels, I was like, yeah, solo backpacking, this is working out fine. And then I saw I actually like didn't evaluate the pass at first. I like made my camp, I set up my tent, I put a chair out because I was like, this is where I'm going to camp. And then I'm going to just get an early start in the morning. And then as I got I left my camp and went to go look at the pass. And I started realizing that, there's quite a bit of snow on here, and I'm actually not quite comfortable with this level of snow. And so I felt bummed. I had planned to make that my base camp. I was ready for the night. I was ready to just enjoy my time at the lake. But yeah, I had to just be in my feelings of being bummed, and I took a snack break and reassessed my options. So this was kind of like my first challenge. First challenge was encountered snow on the pass of my original route. So when I was thinking about my options, I had a couple of main options. So option one was camp there for the night and just turn around and go back the next day. Like, it wasn't a bad option because I still got the solo backpacking experience. But I was like really eager to attempt Mount Langley and see Mount Langley. So it felt like a bit of a bummer, even though it still would have been a great experience. So as I like pulled out my map of the area, and back then they didn't have like Gaia GPS. I don't know if Gaia GPS existed at all, but even if it did, like phone app GPSs were not like where they're at now. They're really good now. They were not then. I had like a Garmin 64ST, I think is what the model was. I don't use it anymore, but that's what I had back then for my GPS. And I had a map of the area. So I pulled up both things and I was like, okay, I remember reading about this other pass to get up to Mount Langley called New Army Pass. And I had missed the turnoff to get to that pass. There was like a fork in the trail originally that I would have taken to New Army Pass, but I took the one to Old Army Pass. And I was like, well, I'm going to have to backtrack a long ways. And as I was looking at the map, I found this like kind of connector fishing trail, like people who were fishing the lakes that had been made. And I was like, okay, wait a second. I think I could easily take this connector trail and make it to New Army Pass with plenty of time before it got super dark. And so I decided that's what I would do. Like, it was a full body yes. Once I kind of clicked that new option in and looked at my GPS, I saw that it was loaded into my GPS, this connector trail. So I felt like good that I wasn't going to get lost. I decided to reroute and go make my base camp below New Army Pass at a different lake, which I don't remember the name of at the moment, but there's another lake out there. There's a couple other lakes. It wasn't the high lake. It was like the one just below it, since I still had some daylight left. So I had to pack up all of my things before I do it, and it was a bit more miles, but I knew I could like make it before dark. And I remember in that moment, you know, I was bummed at first, but then I remember being like, wow, this is so cool. Like, I made this decision on my own. I felt really empowered by all of it. Like, I made this call. I can still keep going on my trip, at least to see if New Army Pass is better. Like, I was giving myself the best shot. It was like a trail I hadn't previously mapped out, but I felt confident I wouldn't get lost. And that moment was a really empowering moment for me. It's kind of hard to explain, but if you've ever had a moment like that where you do make those like on the fly decisions on your own, man, really, really empowering moments. So I, packed up everything and I made it to New Army Pass, or that area where I was going to camp below New Army Pass. And it was just about to get dark. So like I made it just in time with a little time to set up my tent. And I remember looking up at the switchbacks for that pass and they were sun exposed and they were clear. And I was like, this means I'm good to go for an attempt at Mount Langley in the morning. So I was stoked. So I remade my camp. I cooked my camp dinner and then I got in my tent for an early bedtime, because originally I wanted to do like an alpine start for the summit day, which basically meant like I was going to get up really early before the sun rose to just get a head start, because it was going to be a really big day for me. I was going to leave a base camp, go up to the summit of Mount Langley, back to my base camp, and then hike all the way out in one day. So that was going to be a really big day for me. But before that, like one of the things people ask me all the time about is like, or they tell me they are really scared about, is being alone in the dark. Camping alone in the dark really freaks them out. And I'll be honest. So like, I'll share with you my experience that I had for this trip. I remember being spooked by it. Like when you're alone, it's like you hear every single sound like amplified, and your brain doesn't like it because it has never, if you've never gone solo backpacking before, which at this point I hadn't, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to die. That's what your brain says. And you just get freaked out by it. So it's really normal. So I think that's like so important to just know that you're doing a new thing and your brain doesn't like it when you do new things, because it doesn't have any past experiences to be like, to draw upon to tell you it's safe. So it's kind of panicking. So just give yourself some grace there, right? I will give you a few pieces of advice. First, is the reason, like, a lot of people ask me about different kind of tent options, versus like camping out in the open, like cowboy camping is what they call it, or using a bivvy, or maybe even a hammock, which isn't a great option for like the Eastern Sierras, but sometimes people ask me about that. The reason why I like being a tent person, and I have like a 1-person tent and I have a multiple person tent, is because I decide that a tent is my safe space. I think this can be like, it sounds really simple, but I think this can be really powerful when you're going solo. So when I make my tent and I do all the things that you need to do, put my bear can away from my tent, keep all the smelly things in the bear can, I set up my space, and then I zip myself up in my tent. I just decide ahead of time that when I'm in my tent, it is my safe space and I'm safe in there. It's my little home for the evening. And I just go in with full belief that this is my safe space. Like almost like, in those old Westerns when they like put a piece of rope around them and they're like, oh, snakes won't cross it. This is just kind of the belief I've decided to have for myself. And it's really, I think, served me well, because your brain wants to freak out. But if you you tell yourself a different story, like you start to kind of like build that belief. So practice that. It won't you probably won't feel in full belief of it right away, but it does, I think, help. So tent is my safe space is tip number 1. The second tip is, being less scared of being alone in the dark. It just takes time and it takes experience. Especially if you're new to solo adventures, period, or new to like going on solo backpacking or camping trips, you have to build a resume of positive solo experiences in order for your brain to normalize it. Like, think about how we go driving every day. And that's probably one of the most risky things we do as human beings, but we do it all the time. And our brain has normalized it. And you probably have most of us, some of us have negative experiences driving and we still do it. Like my mom got in a car wreck and that's a negative experience, but I have more positive experiences with driving a car. So I don't even think about it anymore. But with solo stuff, backpacking, hiking, camping, you likely, if you're having a lot of fear around it, you just need to build up that resume of positive solo experiences for your brain to be more comfortable with it. And unfortunately, it's not something that you can rush, but you can ease your way into it, and that's something we're going to talk about at the Solo Adventure Summit, like ways you can do that. I have a talk all around our fear and going solo. So definitely think about attending that session if this is something that comes up for you. My third piece of advice is for my ladies who have to pee in the middle of the night. This is just a side tip because a lot of people are like, okay, Allison, I can get behind that tent is my safe space and kind of drop into that, but I have to pee in the middle of the night and then I have to leave the tent. So what I recommend for my students, if they're scared to come out of their tents at night, is to literally plan ahead, bring a disposable water bottle or whatever empty with them on the trail and bring a pee funnel. And then you can just pee in the bottle in your tent without leaving your tent at night. So you don't have to leave your tent. It can always forever be your safe space till the morning. And my only other advice with this is just practice it at home beforehand so you don't pee on your sleeping bag. This is something a lot of my clients do because they just don't love getting out of their tent at night. And that's totally fine. You don't have to if you don't want to. So that's just a little piece of advice from many years of experience. And I have so much more advice around this topic and the fear around going solo and safety when going solo. We have a bunch of really great speakers, and then I will be talking a lot about solo backpacking stuff at our upcoming Solo Adventure Summit in June. Again, that's June 5th and 6th. I have 2 keynote sessions that are focused on solo backpacking and fear when going solo. So stay tuned. Remember, I will be dropping the registration for that at the end of May. So yeah, for me, on my very first solo backpacking trip, the dark was scary for me too. It's a normal thing to experience. You're not alone. I had also, like I said, planned to get an early alpine start the next morning, but I remember when my alarm clock went off that morning and it was still dark, I had a really hard time motivating myself to leave the tent because I would have to take my tent down. I would have to get dressed. I would have to eat breakfast. And I just chickened out and I waited for sunrise. And I think that a lot of women who go solo or anybody who goes solo can relate to that. And don't beat yourself up about it. Just know that going solo and being alone in the dark, it does get a little bit easier. And it's normal for it to still feel scary, even if you're a little bit more seasoned as well. So the next day, when I started moving the next morning, I felt strong and I felt fast. And honestly, I made it up the New Army Pass switchbacks pretty fast. I felt really good about my pace and when I was going. But like once I kind of got over the pass, I realized really quickly that there was more snow on Mount Langley than I was expecting there to be. And I couldn't really assess it very well from down low. You're like, when you look at it down low, it looked patchy. And I was like, well, maybe it's not as bad as it looks. But as I got closer, I realized it was, and I didn't have the gear or quite frankly, the desire to like push into something that might be a little bit sketchy. So I, in that moment, made the safety call not to summit Mount Langley. That's just a decision I decided to make for myself. And I felt really proud of myself for making that call, giving it an honest shot. Like I did what it took to try to find a pass that worked for me, but then making that safety call for myself. So I remember eating some Oreos and like admiring Mount Langley from far off. And I knew I would like come back and summit Mount Langley one day. And I have, for the record. I've actually done it twice now. I did it once with a friend. And I also, one year, I think it was 2023, we took a group of my clients up to the summit of Mount Langley. So that was really fun. I've come back. So it knew it was preparing me for those moments, right? So after Oreos, I turned around and I encountered my third challenge. So if you're keeping up, challenge 1 was my original plan had to be rerouted, some old Army Pass to new Army Pass, but I made that decision on the fly and drew up a new plan. The second challenge was, having to make that safety call of not summiting Mount Langley. And the third challenge was, as I was starting my hike back to the pass, I realized that I had kind of like not gotten lost, but it's kind of hard to explain if you've never been up there. When you get to the top of this area where you're getting ready to go towards Mount Langley, there's still quite a bit of like this open space and it's all dirt. There's not really a defined trail because it's like this sandstone granite and there's like rocks everywhere. Everything looks the same basically. And I realized I couldn't figure out where the entry back into the pass to go back down New Army Pass was. I couldn't find it. Like literally the edge of the cliff area, like all looked the same. Nothing looked like an entry point. And I was a little bit like, at first I was like, oh, I'm going to figure this out. It's not that hard. And I like really couldn't find it. And I almost started to panic. But in those moments, you kind of have to just slow yourself down and like rethink about what tools you have access to. And like I couldn't just pop down anywhere because it cliffed out. So I had to find the right spot to enter the pass. And everything looked the same. But I just backtracked a little bit and looked at my GPS and reconnected myself with the line, which these things are never perfect. GPS is not perfect when it's live tracking you, but I did my best and I retraced my steps back and eventually I found it. But this challenge taught me a couple of really great lessons that I've taken forward with me with other challenging, harder to navigate trails. So this was a really good experience for me to have. One of the lessons that I learned is to put a pin on my GPS for all the little things like this, like the top of a pass. I always put a pin at the top of a pass, other little important things like important waypoints, like your camp or water. Like if you're hiking on a trail, this was so true when if you listen back at, we did a podcast trail series of a really challenging route in the Grand Canyon. That one was a very hard to navigate trail. So I put pins everywhere on little important waypoints like water, like little puddles even, just in case I ever had to go back to a puddle because we couldn't find better water sources. So I have become like a maniac when it comes to putting pins everywhere. You look at my live tracks, you'll see pins, but it's so important for things like this. So that was tip number 1. And also just to be better aware of my surroundings when the terrain and trail like either disappear or are harder to follow. It's very important that you're kind of like paying attention to these cues and not like zoning out, because there are sometimes sections like this where you could get yourself in a pickle and things cliff out if you take the wrong trail. So those are very like 2 important lessons that I learned here. And yeah, I learned a valuable lesson, but I also showed myself in this moment yet again that I can figure it out even when I get a little bit scared or I come up against something that is challenging, right? So throughout this whole experience, I've encountered like multiple challenges, and it keeps happening, so you'll just wait. But I'm proving to myself that I can trust myself. It's really important. These trips, these solo trips like this are so important to remind yourself of how capable you are and how much you have your own back, right? So I made it back to the trailhead. The rest of the hike was pretty uneventful and great, but plot twist, yet again, when I got back to my car battery was dead because, of course, it was dead. The universe was like, Allison, I have one more lesson for you to close out this solo backpacking adventure, your first solo backpacking trip. And that lesson was to invest in a self-starting car jumper. But since I didn't have one of those yet in this moment, I had to yet again drop my options, like think of what I could do. And so I remember sitting there, I'm like, okay, it's Sunday evening because it was kind of later in the day. And like a lot of the day hikers are gone. So like, what are my options? I also didn't have a satellite messenger device like the Garmin InReach Mini back then. I hadn't invested in one yet, and so I couldn't message anybody. That wasn't an option. That would have been like maybe one of the options I added to my list is like message somebody to have a shuttle come pick me up or something like that. Because sometimes in these small mountain towns, people do like shuttle pickups, and we could have figured something out, right? But I didn't have that option, so that wasn't one of my options. So my options were like, I knew I could technically hike back into town from where I was if I absolutely needed to. I don't remember how many miles back. I knew it would be a long hike on an already really long day. But I did have extra food. That's something I always do for my trips is like I pack a little bit more food than I think I need just in case I have to make decisions like staying out on the trail an extra day or I got hurt, or for this example, hiking back into trail versus driving back into trail or into town. And I had plenty of water. And I had my backpacking gear. So even if I needed to like set up camp on the way down somewhere, I would be fine. So that was an option 1, not necessarily the one I wanted to take, but it was an option. The second option was like, okay, like I could actually start hiking back into town and maybe I'll run into somebody who's driving up or down and they could give me like a ride back into town, like hitchhike a ride back into town. It's like a hiker's town. There's a lot of people that go in and out. Or my third option was like, maybe I'd get lucky and I would run into somebody at the trailhead who could jump my car. But again, it was like early evening on a Sunday and a lot of the people had already left from their weekend adventures because the parking lot was pretty sparse. So I was like, and there was nobody there when I got there. So I was like, either everybody else's cars that are here, they're out for longer trips, or like maybe I'll get lucky and somebody will still be coming back. But I wasn't sure. So I was evaluating all my options, and then a group of like 3 hikers exited the Cottonwood Lakes Trail. I like heard them and I was like, oh my gosh, yes. Well, hopefully like they can either give me a ride back into town or they can give me a jump. And one of them had jumper cables and was able to give my car a jump. So I made it all the way back home. I was afraid to turn my car off until I got there, but I made it successfully back from my solo backpacking trip. So yeah, that was it, y'all. My very first solo backpacking trip. It was full of pivots and plot twists. I did not summit Mount Langley, but I did walk away from that trip standing a little bit taller. And I had navigated a change of route plan. I slept under the stars alone. I made solid safety decisions based on my judgment and no one else's. And, solo backpacking, it didn't make me more of a legit hiker or backpacker, but it did remind me of how badass and capable I am. And it gave me a massive dose of self-trust that I still carry to today. These experiences are so valuable because of the lessons that you learn. And it taught me a lot of valuable lessons, as the mountains often do, that have made me a better backpacker and a better leader overall. So I hope that me sharing my experience gives you a little bit more courage to know that you don't have to be fearless going into your trip to go on a solo backpacking adventure, and that, there will be challenges and there will be plot twists during your trip, but that is what makes your backpacking experiences, your solo backpacking experiences, even more valuable to you as a backpacker and as you grow as a hiker and backpacker. Because for me, the person who hikes and backpacks and their trip always goes 100% according to plan, they are not growing nearly as much as the backpacker who has to learn how to make pivots and safety calls on the fly in the backcountry. That is when you truly grow. So if you've always had things go 100% according to plan, just know push yourself a little bit more to encounter some of those challenges so that you can grow and expand your skills in the backcountry. That is why I really believe that pre-trip planning and preparation is so important. And it's something that I focus on teaching my clients in our Backpacking Badass program. It is that pre-work that really enables you to be in your power and not in your panic when things most likely do not go according to plan, because it's the outdoors and nature and weather and all the things have their own agenda, right? They don't, run to our own agenda. They run to their own beat of the drum, right? So if you're dreaming of your own solo backpacking trip, here are a few quick takeaways from that first experience that you can take with you. So number 1 is trust your gut, but come prepared. I had the skills and the tools to pivot safely because I had planned well for this adventure. I had navigation, route research, weather checks, all of those things locked in. Those things matter. Number 2 is it's okay to adjust your plan. Changing your route or turning around is not a failure. It's actually the ultimate show of self-leadership. Number 3 is remembering that fear is normal, but it doesn't have to call the shots. Make sure that you just embrace it as part of the process and then keep taking those next small steps forward. And number 4, this one seems minor, but it's big. Decide ahead of time that you are safe and that you can trust yourself. So for my ladies that have some hiking and backpacking experience and knowledge under your belts, you do know what you're doing, you're not going completely in without knowing anything, but you're still feeling nervous about going solo, a big thing that holds many people back is this self-trust piece. You have to, at some point, decide ahead of time that you're going to have your own back no matter what comes up. You have to decide that you're safe, and safety is actually a feeling that we can create ahead of time. And I'd love to teach you more about this inside of my Backpacking Badass program. If you're interested in learning more about that, creating more safety and self-sufficiency and all of those things, you can join the waitlist for our Backpacking Badass program by going to shedreamsofalpine.com/waitlist. And I'd love to help you more with this. So that is it for today, my friends. If you've been sitting on the fence about going solo, I hope this story about my first solo backpacking trip maybe nudged you one step closer and feeling more confident in doing it in the future. You don't have to do it all at once. Just start taking those next steps, building the trust in your skills, in your prep, and in yourself. And I'm rooting for you. All right, y'all. I will catch you next week with another episode. Talk to you soon. Bye. Hey, I wanted to thank you real quick for tuning into the show and listening all the way to the end. If you love this episode and you want deeper support in becoming a safe, confident, and self-sufficient hiker and backpacker, then head over to shedreamsofalpine.com/waitlist to learn more about our Backpacking Badass coaching program, where I teach you absolutely everything you need to know to be self-reliant on the trails and stop waiting around on others for the adventure invite. So I'd love to help you more in your journey of stepping into your adventurous identity, and that program is the absolute best place for us to start working together. So again, that's shedreamsofalpine.com/waitlist, and you can learn all about it there. So that's it for today, folks. I hope you get to spend some time outside this week, and I'll be back very soon with a brand new episode. Bye.